Chapter 2 of The Whistling Mountain by Mary Daem. What funny houses! They're built up so high. His parents were so busy talking that they didn't hear David's remark. So he stood in the station and stared at the odd-looking houses. There weren't very many, to be sure. Only 5 of them in a small store and a building with swings outside and a flag and a flagpole. Why, he thought in amazement, that must be the school. Just plain red boards and steps like those other houses. The school he had gone to in Vancouver had covered nearly a city block, and it had more windows than a fellow could count. He looked back at the houses. They looked as though they had been built on stilts, and every one of them had a steep set of steps. They were all painted the same ugly red. If that was all there was to the town, David did not think much of it. "Where's our house, Dad?" he asked, getting his father's attention by pulling at his arm. Mr. Dunn stopped and pointed right up the mountainside. "I don't see it." "Neither do I. It's hidden by all those trees. Now, David, you take this shopping bag, and your mother will take this small suitcase. I'll put all I can into my rucksack and carry this one box in my hand. We'll leave the rest with Bill here, and I'll make another trip later. Come on, we'd better start walking." He waved his free hand at the station master and moved away from the station. "Isn't there a taxi we could take, Dad?" asked David without thinking, as he felt the weight of the shopping bag. And then he felt very foolish. His father laughed. "Of course there isn't a taxi, son. Remember, there are no roads here. This is almost complete wilderness. We're lucky at that. Some of the posts have no one near at all, nor are they close to a railroad, and most certainly not a school." A small boy ran out of one of the houses and then stopped short and grinned at them. Mr. Dunn spoke to him by name. From the steps of the house, a smiling woman waved. "Anything I can do for you, you just let me know," she called. "Everybody is so friendly here," Mr. Dunn said. "It won't be long before you feel at home." David took another look at the shabby little school building and sniffed disdainfully. He had his own private views about that. Next minute, his eyes brightened and he bumped the shopping bags against his legs without even noticing it. The path they were following led to a sturdy log bridge, which crossed right over a creek. The creek was swift and the water went tearing and rushing along, fighting itself into a froth. "Look at that," David marveled. "That's the Swiftwater River, Davy. It's deep as well as fast, and it's one good place for you to stay away from." "Any fish in it?" "Yes, and we'll try catching some when I get time. But don't you ever try fishing it alone. I mean it." David moved slowly across the bridge, watching the water every step of the way. He could see the white water through the cracks in the boards, and he wished he could reach down and touch it. He was so busy watching the water that he almost bumped into 2 little girls and their mother. They smiled at him and giggled. At the little store, which smelled of peppermints and coffee and soap, several people spoke to David, while his father collected the mail, and his mother bought bread and a pound of butter. He remembered his manners and answered them, but afterwards he could not even remember what they looked like. There were just too many things that were new. The trail from the store led straight up the mountain. It was almost as wide as a railroad, and it went right through the heavy brush and timber. A friendly little stream tinkled along beside it, and flowers, all strange to David, grew thickly at its edges. When he looked up, the trees towered above him, but he could see the sky. There wasn't a single car, and his ears seemed to hurt with the quietness. Up in the branches of a tall pine tree, something stirred. It sounded exactly like a miniature machine gun. "Is that a marmot, Dad?" David asked, trying to forget that he had jumped in fright. "No, that's a red squirrel. Marmots are much bigger, and they don't climb trees. Now stop and look way up, high along that branch that sticks out. He's sitting near the end of it, warning all the forest folk that we are on our way." "There he is," David pointed excitedly. "Golly, isn't he up high?" The squirrel began to chatter angrily again, and David laughed out loud and chattered right back at him. "You'll see lots of squirrels here," his father remarked, as he started off again. "You can even tame them if you're patient enough. They'll eat nuts right from your fingers." David's eyes shone. The trail turned and became steeper, and it was wet underfoot. The back of his legs began to ache, and he started to puff like a steam engine. Do you suppose we could stop for a drink of water? He asked hopefully. Right this very minute. Now you watch how this is done. You couldn't do this in Vancouver. Mr. Dunn put down the box he was carrying, eased his pack from his shoulders, and chose a large leaf from one of the bushes. He rolled it into the shape of a drinking horn, and bending down, dipped it into the clear water of the little stream, and offered it first to David's mother, and then to David himself. David took a big swallow. The water was cold and tasted clean. Some of it ran down his chin. He knelt down himself to refill the leaf cup. The water was so clear, he could see a red stone right on the bottom, and he reached and got it and put it in his pocket. And then as he stood up, his feet slipped, and he was standing right in the little creek. "Oh, David, look at you," his mother exclaimed. "Your shoes will be ruined." "I didn't mean to," David explained. "I don't know how it happened." They went on up the trail, and it got steeper and steeper. The shopping bag was heavy, and water squished from his shoes. He was fairly uncomfortable, and it felt as though a blister were forming on his heel. It seemed as if they must have walked at least 10 miles, but he supposed not, and he didn't want to ask. He stopped to catch his breath, and there right beside him, growing out from the bank, he noticed a fern, just exactly like the one they had kept in a big brass pot in the apartment. "Look at this," he called excitedly. He knelt to get a better look at it. "Get up, look at your good clothes." He scrambled hastily to his feet, wiping the mud from his knees. "Everything is so damp at this time of year. You'll have to watch where you're kneeling." "But wasn't it fun to see a fern growing wild like that? You know, David, part of my new job is to know all the names of the plants that grow in this part of the park. So far, I don't know them all, and perhaps we could learn them together." David looked up at his father. "I think I'd like to do that. Is our house much further now? My feet are sure getting tired." "That's because you aren't used to walking on trails like this, or to climbing either. You'll soon get used to it." "Are there any of those whistling things close to our house, Dad?" "No, not really close. And it isn't a house, it's a cabin. Marmots live higher up the mountains, where there are lots of loose rocks for them to hide under. On a quiet day, you can sometimes hear them whistle if you sit on the steps of the cabin. The sound they make carries a long way." The trail kept on going up. David was sure they must be climbing right up to the moon. But just when he was certain he could not take another step, they turned a corner, and there his new home was, all laid out like a picture in a storybook. The end of chapter 2.